A curious thing, public opinion polls, they really aren't that trustworthy, though many people, particularly politicians and news people, tend to trust them a whole lot, treat them as if they were gospel. How often, however, are they not such a good guide? Yet in our over-communicated world, generally polls can't be ignored. Thus, with regard to the latest effort by the BBC. A poll for the BBC's World Service suggests that a majority of people around the world believe that Israel and Iran are the countries with the most negative influence in the world. And slightly behind the poor view of Israel and Iran come the United States and North Korea. The poll asked 28,000 people in 27 countries to rate a dozen countries, plus the European Union, in terms of whether they have a positive or negative influence. Canada, Japan and the EU are viewed most positively in the survey, perhaps say the compilers, because they have taken less high-profile roles in the world's recent confrontations. With respect to Israel, the non-admiration runs along traditional fault lines. Israel viewed most negatively in Muslim countries, but also in Europe. The instant Israeli reaction to the poll was, you see, proof of what we have always known, that the whole world is against us, no matter what we do. That may certainly be one valid reaction, and so too a parallel attitude among Israelis whenever they are criticized by the outside world. So what? Let's forget about it and move on, they tend to say. But is there not also another aspect to this issue of Israel's negative international image, one which Israel should take note of? An attitude which, though it takes into account the inbuilt prejudice of the BBC poll, the unfairness of such a poll, nonetheless puts the issue of positive acceptance by the world community into a broader context. It relates to a very basic question. What do Israelis regard as the greatest guarantee for their existence, for the survival of their state? Is it the biblical heritage? Peace and recognized boundaries, perhaps? Israel's military capability and the doctrine of military preemption? The ambiguity inherent in Israel's assumed nuclear capability? Or is it perhaps international legitimacy? All these are indeed important ingredients, maintains conservative ideologue and political scientist Professor Jarrold Kessel. All these elements are important, but Draw once put it cogently to me, there is one factor that supersedes all of them in this survival equation. He put it this way. It's that the world knows that if Israel ever felt that its survival was threatened, Israel would not hesitate to do what it takes to ensure survival. In other words, his argument was the world understands that if Israel does indeed have nuclear capability, it would be ready to use it if it ever were to feel that its existence was really in jeopardy. Anyone contemplating messing about with Israel's survival would, it seems, indeed be foolhardy not to heed this Draw analysis. But there's another way to relate to this existential question of national survival. It may not be the central factor in guaranteeing Israel's future, but international legitimacy, full acceptance by the world, is an important ingredient in the well-being of Israeli society and should not be scornfully shoved aside, especially if that legitimacy is accorded by Israel's immediate neighbors, the Arab world. Which brings me directly to an issue which has resurfaced in the last few days, the urgent need for a new, sensible, realistic and practical peace initiative. It wasn't exactly at the forefront of the national debate this week, but it was very encouraging to hear senior government sources in Jerusalem note that for the first time Israel is indeed relating seriously to the so-called Saudi peace plan, a 5-year-old initiative which until now Israel has strenuously ignored. In advance of a planned summit at the end of the month in Riyadh, the top-level government sources let it be known that Israel anticipates, hopes, expects that the Arab League will adopt an improved version of the Saudi plan. Above all, that the moderates within the Arab world will take into account Israel's principal reservation, which was publicly voiced by Foreign Minister Tzipi Livni, the need to revamp one central element in that united Arab peace initiative. That aspect of the peace plan which relates to the rights of Palestinian refugees to return to their original homes in what is now the State of Israel. A red line, Tzipi Livni called it, although she spoke warmly of the original draft presented by Saudi Arabia's King Abdullah, a plan which calls for full Israeli withdrawal to the pre-1967 borders in exchange for peace and normalization between the entire Arab world and Israel. That's a formula which crusading peace journalist Akiva Eldar characterizes thus. 40 years ago, it would have been considered the Zionist dream come true, that full acceptance by the entire Arab world. Admittedly, said also the Israeli foreign minister, the initiative refers to the 1967 lines, a starting point which Israel does not accept. But then she added, I can only wish that we would be in a situation where the basic attitude was that this is a conflict which is only a dispute about borders. Now, it's important to note that the 2002 Riyadh initiative, which might indeed one day come to be seen as a major landmark on the road to a full and comprehensive peace between the Arab world and Israel, it could hardly have come and have been launched at a worst possible moment. It came as Israelis felt very threatened and not at all ready for compromise, coming as it did when hundreds of Israelis were being killed in a slew of sustained Palestinian suicide bombings all over the country. But right now, as the Tel Aviv Daily Haaretz noted, the situation is altogether different. Even after last year's Lebanon war, and with the declarations by the Iranian president that Israel must be wiped off the map, the Saudi message, which seems to be coming through loud and clear, is this: Israel is a welcome partner in the region, provided it gives up the territories that were occupied in 1967. At a time when the region threatens to divide up not into the rest versus Israel, but into moderates versus extremists, it very much doesn't seem to be a moment for backs to be turned on acceptance or on moderate views. The Riyadh summit is set for the end of the month. On both sides within the moderate camp in the region, Israeli and Arab, there is very much need for thorough soul-searching between now and then. The month ahead could turn out to be just another of those moments which have regrettably come and gone all too often in the Middle East. Wasted peace moments, squandered opportunities. Will this now be a moment when all moderate forces in the region recognize the imperative not to squander the moment again? A leading member of the Knesset, Rabbi Michael Melchior, summed up the situation soberly this week. He said, together with the uncompromising demand for the escalation of terror and the insistence on maintaining Israel's security, we must seek to broaden all existing channels of dialogue with the Arab world. Those of us who do not want the current leadership among the Palestinians will find that we get instead Islamic Jihad and Al-Qaeda, said Rabbi Melchior, who concluded, if we bury hope that positive developments are in fact possible, we risk finding ourselves facing instead an Arab world which unites behind an Iranian intention to annihilate Israel. A moment worth heeding indeed.